Welcome back to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter on day 121. I am reading through the Bible in 1 year. I'm your host, Kathy, and we are reading through it using the 1 Year Chronological Bible reading plan. You can find this online for free as a download printable at the 1 Year Chronological Bible online.com. And so today's reading is April 30th, day 121, and the reading is 2 Samuel 19 through 21. Psalm 7 and 1 Chronicles 24 through 8. So it's, a big reading. We're trying to read through it all, so to get through all of it in a year to help us understand the heart of God, who he is, why he did what he did with his people, why that matters to us, why we follow him, and what is the meaning sort of for our lives in that. And so today, just a little bit of background about where we've been. Not too much. I'm only going to go back as far as David because going back to the beginning is too much. But we are now in the kingdom of David. So this is the kingdom of Israel. David is the king. He is the leader. He has brought all 12 tribes together. After doing that, there were some mishaps, which you can look back a few days to see what those mishaps were. And now his son Absalom took over for a little while, and while he was running, and then the Lord took the life of Absalom, and now David is coming back into Jerusalem, so coming back into the land of Israel. All of the tribes have agreed to bring him back as king, and so now he and his troops are walking their way back into Jerusalem. As they're coming back, people are in some ways coming out of the woodwork, and they're either apologizing for past deeds or they're confirming his kingship, right? Whatever it might be. And so now this is kind of where we stumble upon at this point in our story. So at day 121, we start on 2 Samuel 19. And in 2 Samuel 19, we're 2 Samuel 19:31. So we don't even start at the beginning of the chapter. In 31, it says, Barzillai the Gileadite also came down from Mogulim to cross the Jordan with the king and to send him on his way from here. So we met this guy not that long ago when David was at war with Absalom. Absalom had taken over the kingdom, and David had to leave the kingdom with some of his men. When he left the kingdom with some of his men, Barzillai was one of the guys who came and brought him food and supplies and all these things for the men because he looked like he was hungry and tired. So taking that sort of in context, we're going to assume that in some way he supported David, right? In some way they either had worked together in the past, and so they were supporting each other and their kingdoms, or whatever it might be. So Barzillai was one of his helpers or supporters. And so he's old, he's 80, and David wants him to come back to Jerusalem with him. And it's just funny to hear that he's old at 80 because we know that Moses lived until 120, 130-ish, somewhere around there. Joshua lived, I think, into his 100. So to hear that 80 was really old, and not just that 80 was old, he's kind of like, I can't hear anything, I can't see anything, I can't taste anything, right? So it's not just that he's an old man, it's just that he's a really old man. He's like, I'm not going to make it. I don't have a lot of time left. And so what can I offer you, right? I can't really be of much service to you. But David wanted to thank him. And so instead of having Barzillai come over, he has Kimham come. And he says, I want to send Kimham in my place. So he was sort of taking the place of Barzillai. And so David, of course, agrees to this offer. And he says, he's going to cross over for me. And then I wanted to note this because he says in verse 38, he says, I will do for him. So David's saying, I will do for Kimham whatever you wish. So whatever you desire for me to do for him, I'm going to do for him. And then anything you desire from me, I will do that for you also. So this isn't just sort of swapping places. He's still showing honor to Barzillai. And then he's also bringing this younger person over in Barzillai's place and treating him as if he would treat Barzillai. So we're seeing, I don't want to say we're seeing David come back to a better place, because there have always been really good qualities about him. And one of the things seems to be, some of the ways that he honors the Lord. And so, this calamity is really happening because of the whole situation with Bathsheba and Uriah. And if you don't know that situation, if you're not familiar with that situation, I want you to bump back a few days it was still in Samuel, but I want you to bump back like 3 or 4 days, maybe in like the April 14th, 15th range. So you can find out what that story is. And so you maybe have a little bit of context as to the story. So then in verse 40, it says, when the king crossed over to Gilgal, Kimham crossed over with him. All the troops of Judah and half the troops of Israel had taken the king over. So they met him, right? And so they met him and all of his troops. And so they're all crossing over together. And then as soon as they get over, here we are fighting again. So now it seems like Israel is fighting with Judah. So Judah was the last tribe to accept David as king again. And then David got pretty upset and he was like, I'm from you people. Like, I am one of you and you guys haven't lifted me up as king yet. And all the rest of the tribes of Israel have. And now sort of we're in this spot where Israel's kind of like, he's mine first. And Judah's like, well, he's mine because he's my blood. And so they're in some ways fighting over it. The only thing I wanted to note, because I of course I find it interesting that the tribes are split already, which is something that we're actually going to see in the future, that the tribes split. And so there's already some of that split that we see, but it says the 10 tribes. So I just want to find where it is. So in verse 43, the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 shares in the king. So we have a greater claim on David than you do. And again, they were just trying to kind of have ownership of David, more power, more influence. One of two things could be the 10 shares. I actually thought it was something different because I thought, which we'll see in the future, that Benjamin wasn't a part of the 10, but it looks like that they are possibly combining Simeon into the tribe of Judah. So if you remember, Simeon's kind of this like little inside, like their people group is a small tribe inside the land of Judah. Judah's kind of got this big portion in the south. And so so Simeon is in that part of the tribe. And so, there's two. I had to look at my notes to remember what the other one was, but that one was the first one. And the second one is there's a possibility that they are calling the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh one tribe. And that would really be the tribe of Joseph. And so they're considering that one tribe. So if they would say 10, and I'm saying this because there's a total of 12 tribes. Judah's one, that leaves 11. So when they say the 10 clans or the 10 tribes, where's the missing one? And the missing one could be Simeon, which is in Judah, or it could be that they combined Ephraim and Manasseh as the tribe of Joseph. I hope that makes sense. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter too much, but just a greater understanding geographically of kind of what's happening in this time, right? Because we do see some of these splits. And sometimes they say, Ephraim, but they mean Ephraim and Manasseh, right? They have them combined because they're brothers, or they'll say Joseph, and where they mean both of those tribes combined. So just to be aware of some of those things. All right. So, and then they're just, like I said, they're just fighting back and forth over who holds claim over David. So then we move down into 2 Samuel 20, verse 1. It says, now a troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjamite, happened to be there, and he sounds the trumpet and says, we have no share in David. Benjamin is kind of been a thorn in the side for a long time. If you remember back in Judges, or maybe it was 1 Samuel, but I'm pretty sure it was in Judges, they fought with the rest of the tribes because of the 12 pieces of the body of the woman that was split. And then Saul came from that tribe, and that didn't go well. So Benjamin is a little bit of trouble. And here we go again. Sheba has come up from Benjamin. And even when Absalom took over, there were some issues with the tribe of Benjamin. So Sheba comes up, and the guys split once again. And Judah sticks with David, and Israel follows Sheba. Sheba's like, we don't want anything to do with David. David's not our leader. He's not our king. Israel, let's kind of revolt and not be with them. And so they all start, Israel, those 10 tribes, start following Sheba instead of David. And so then in verse 4, it says, King David says to Amasa, summon the men of Judah to come with me within 3 days and be here for yourself. So they're going after Sheba because David's worried that he's going to be a bigger problem than Absalom was. Absalom already divided the tribes. And so he's like, Sheba's going to be a bigger problem. We've got to handle this, and we've got to handle it really quickly. And so he starts to send troops out, And when he sends the troops out, Amasa is now his leader. So going back a few weeks, Joab was the army's leader. David took him out, and he put Amasa in his place after they came back from Absalom. So now Amasa is supposed to go out. So I'm going to read here. David said, oh, I'm sorry. Then the king said to Amasa, summon the men of Judah, which is the one tribe, to come to me within 3 days, and then you be here yourself. And then Amasa goes, and then in 3 days, he doesn't come back. And that's kind of, then we don't hear from him again. Then in verse 6, then David says to Abishai, which is Joab's brother, Sheba will do us more harm than Absalom did. Take your master's men and pursue him. So then he's sending all of his troops to go out and fight Sheba's guys. So he's going to tell them to go chase him, right? So now we have Amasa has gone this way to gather Judah, right? And the troops of Judah. And then, I shouldn't even say directionally. They might have gone out in the same direction, but one went one way. Amasa goes one way, and then Abishai goes and chases Sheba, right? So we have these two different things that are happening. Well, Amasa goes and chases Sheba, and then they sort of corner Sheba, right? So they have him in essentially a stronghold. They have him in a town. At the same time, Amasa sees Joab, who used to run the army. He sees Joab. There's this whole little story about how Joab drops his knife, picks up his knife. Anyway, stabs Amasa, and he's bleeding. And he falls on the ground, and he's bleeding. And then Joab then gathers all of those troops to himself. So, he was the army's leader, but Joab gathers all these troops to himself. So he's now running the army again. Abishai is his brother. He's running the army again. And then they take and they drag Amasa off. He's like bleeding. He's on the road. They cover him, and then they bring him into a field, and they leave him there. Now, at the same time, they're pursuing Sheba, and so Joab is now leading, and they're all in pursuit of Sheba. They all pass him. He passes through the tribes of Israel to Abel Beth Makkah, and through the entire region of the Bichrites who gathered. And then all the troops with Joab came. They besieged Sheba, so she was like hiding. And then a wise woman comes out. And I want to say wise woman. I don't think it's a wise woman. Like, she's not a woman that just was wise, which would be great. But I don't think that's what it is. I think it was a title. So I think she had a title of being a wise woman. She was somebody special and particular in their tribe. And she's like, we're here in this place, and we are a very peaceful place. We follow the Lord, right? And so she doesn't like that he's there. So she doesn't like that Joab and all the troops are there, and they're coming after Sheba, right? And it's not even that they're coming after Sheba. They're all there, and they're all ready to attack. And she's like, this is a peaceful area. We don't want you here. And so he says, listen, Sheba is back there, and we need to get him. And so they figure out this idea. So she continues, he says, far be it, so Joab says, far be it for me to swallow up or destroy. This is not the case. A man named Sheba from the hill country of Ephraim has lifted up his hand against the king, against David. So the woman says, his head will be thrown to you over the wall. So easy answer. He's in there hiding. Joab needs him. He went up against the king. Then she throws his head over the wall. So she kind of handles the situation. And then they leave. They don't want to do anything more with it. So then Joab was over the Israel's entire army. And then so we're just going to start talking about the people that were in charge, which we've done this on one hand. We've actually done this before. This is the second time. Joab is now back in charge over Israel's army. Benaniah is over the Kerethites and the Pelethites. If you remember, they weren't Israelites, but they were helping out David. Adoniram was in charge of forced labor. So this is something a little bit new. Jehoshaphat was the recorder. So again, possibly the one that's writing this book. And Sheva was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar, who we've met before, were priests. And then Ira the Jairite was David's priest. So I'm assuming he was in the line of Absalom. So he was David's priest. So that's just reviewing the people who were in David's cabinet, because they kind of were like, this is what happened. This is kind of an upset that we've had. And now these were all the pieces lay after that. So we're going to take a little break from that, and then we're going to move on to Psalm 7. So all of this is going on, and it still feels like Israel is messy at this point. They don't necessarily seem to be combined together, so they're having a lot of problems. And once again, we see that the king is, instead of sort of wallowing in his own self-misery, he's reaching out to the Lord, and he writes a psalm to the Lord. And it starts with, Lord, this is Psalm 7, and it says, Lord my God, I take refuge in you. Save and deliver me from all who pursue me, or they will tear me apart like a lion and rip me to pieces with no one to rescue me. So essentially, he's just like crying out to the Lord. I'm getting battered. I'm probably scared. Everyone's coming after me. I'm sure he feels alone, right? Like all these terrible things. So these are these beautiful things for us as the reader One, to recognize that a king feels like this, right? Even though he's a king and he's powerful and God has anointed him and he's been put in his place and all the tribes are supporting him, there's still what we would probably deem now as maybe like fear, depression, anxiety, right? Like all of these things, he recognizes that people are coming after him, and in some ways, it's his own people. Like right at one place, it was his son. So there are people that are coming after him that, it's making him fearful. And his help is the Lord. So that's who he's turning to for help. So in this next little section, 3 through 5, I think he's pretty accepting that if it is something that he has done, he's willing to take punishment for it. So, Lord my God, if I have done this, if there's guilt on my hands, then let my enemy pursue me and take over me. So he's asking for help, but he's also saying, but if it's me and I have done something, Lord, then by all means, let my enemy pursue me and take me over. But then he's saying, but if it's not, and then it goes into verse 6, arise, Lord, in your anger, rise up against the rage of my enemies. Awake, my God, decree justice, the things that are right, the things that are good. The people gather around you. And then moving to this next section, verse 8, it says, let the Lord judge the peoples, so judge them, and then vindicate me according to my righteousness. So again, this is not just us saying, please help me and make everything better. And I know we have an urge to do that. And I understand the urge to do that. I also have the urge to do that. There are times in my heart where things are just not going well. And please just fix it. Make it better. I don't think that's what David is doing. I think David is recognizing that he is not perfect. He is not always doing the right thing. And so if he is not doing the right thing, Lord, please let me know and do what you need to, because you are righteous and you are good, right? And you're just. But if it is not, and my enemies are pursuing me unjustly, then Lord, protect me and save me according to my righteousness, right? Like if I have done wrong, then judge in that way. But if I haven't done wrong, then judge in that way. So it says, even you, the righteous God who probes minds and hearts. So you know whether there's righteousness or unrighteousness, right? In the hearts or in the actions of the people. And then God is his shield. And then it says in verse, God is a righteous judge. God is a righteous judge, a God who displays his wrath every day. And now it says, if he does not relent, he will sharpen his sword. He will bend and string his bow. He has prepared his deadly weapons. He makes ready his flaming arrows. I think, I'm not too sure, but I think if he does not relent, I think this is a person, right? So if these people don't relent, right? Like God is the one who will do the work, but it's if these people don't relent, like God is my shield. God is the one protecting me from people who keep coming after me. And then verse 14, whoever is pregnant with evil conceives trouble and gives birth to disillusionment. Whoever digs a hole and scoops it out falls into the pit that they have made. So judge them according to that and take care of them according to the people that cause trouble, right? And then he says, I'm going to give thanks to the Lord because of his righteousness. I'll sing the praises of him. So I just think that David is opening us up to a recognition that when we pray to the Lord, when we lift anything up to the Lord in any of the reasons that we do, there is a desire that we want God to look into our own hearts as well. And so there's something there that he wants to make sure that he is righteous in doing the right thing, as much as he wants to make sure that those that are against God are punished. All right, moving on, finishing up. This is David avenges the Gibeonites. So during this time, kind of like probably when he's writing the psalm, and there's some upheaval and everything, there's also a famine. And so there was a 3-year famine, which is really bad, obviously really dangerous, trouble with food, people eating, and, the poor and crops and everything like that. And so he asks the Lord about it. And the Lord says right away in verse 1, it says, it's on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It's because he put the Gibeonites to death. Now, we didn't see this battle. So in all the things that we've read in the past, we never read about this battle, but we're getting a little bit of insight to this battle. Sorry, a little cough and fit. So it said that, but Saul in his zeal, so I'm going to go back to this. Now, the Gibeonites were not part of Israel, but were survivors of the Amorites. The Israelites had sworn to spare them. But Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, had tried to annihilate them. So even though they had been promised that they were going to be saved. Saul threatened to annihilate them. So David was like, how can I make this up to you? What can I do to make this better? This thing that the Lord has told me is wrong. And so they said, they said, not silver, not gold, not money, none of those things will do. But they needed 7 sacrifices from Saul's house. So he wouldn't sacrifice Mephibosheth because he made a promise to Jonathan. And that was a covenant with Jonathan under the Lord. And so he wasn't going to harm Mephibosheth or anyone in his house. So he took other descendants of Saul's. So 7 sons, grandsons, right? So relations of Saul. And he gave them over to the Gibeonites. And the Gibeonites, I believe, hanged them. And they said they left them on the hill. And so they wanted everyone to know that this retribution was paid, that this was made. So this was something that David did to honor the Lord and to honor the people of, the Gibeonites who were, who God did not agree to do this thing to. Like, God didn't tell Saul to do this. And so after that, the mom of a couple of the boys stayed out there all the time. So she stayed out there day and night. She put up like she pulled out a sheet, I guess, kind of thing. And she wound up staying. And she wouldn't let the birds get at them, and she wouldn't let the animals get at them. And then so David, and I'm feeling as if David had a heart for this. So when David found out she was doing this, he wound up going and getting the bones of Saul and Jonathan and burying them with their dad, their father Kish. And so it feels like he kind of closed a circle in that family. So as terrible as that pronouncement was, right, that 7 of those sons had to die, he made it, made it better is probably the wrong word, but he finished everything off, right? So he brought the bones back where they belonged, right, because they were Israelites. And so he brought those bones back where they belong, and he had them in the house of his father. And then God took away the famine. So after that, the famine was done. And then what we say, so it says after, on the very end of that, in 14, it says, after that, God answered prayer in behalf of the land. And so it seemed like the famine was over. And so then we see after that, we just see some battles. We got some battles in 2 Samuel and in 1 Chronicles. We have some battles with the sons of Gath. And so they are, if you guys remember the whole David and Goliath, and again, if you don't remember David and Goliath, go back a few days. I wish I remember what they were. If I think about it, I'll put notes at the bottom on what those dates were. But go back to the sons of Gath. And when David fought Goliath, Goliath was from Gath. And so these are relations to Goliath in some way, shape, or form, right? Maybe part of their tribe, their clan, whatever. But some of the point is that they were gigantic people. They were strong. They were warriors. They were huge. One had 6 fingers on every hand. So not every, because there's only 2, but 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each feet, each foot. And so they were like big and mighty, powerful people. They were Philistines. And so they were against the people of Israel. And in the battles, David's people won these battles against these people and killed these people. So killed these giants against them. And so we see that God is working for Israel. The famine is gone. They're back to winning battles. But at the same time, David is not doing well. So David wound up not being able to. So one of these giants came after David while David was sort of resting, because he's getting older and he's obviously not as mighty in battle as he used to be. And so they said in verse, so we're in 2 Samuel 21, and we're in verse 17. It says, Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to David's rescue. He struck the Philistine down and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, saying, never again will you go out with us to battle, so that the lamp of Israel will not be extinguished. So they recognize he's not doing well in battle, and they're like, that's it, you're done. Kind of your time here is over, but not because you're old and worn out, but because you are the light. It's the lamp. You are the light of Israel. You are what people are looking towards. You are the one that follows God. You are the one that people love and want to follow. And so they don't want him to die in battle. And so they've kind of taken that away from him and urged him. I mean, they say never again. So I'm being nice when I say urge. They're essentially saying you're done. You're not in battle anymore. And so they take him back, and he's just going to rule the kingdom from here on out. He's no longer going to be a warrior in any of the wars. And that's how today finishes. We finish with our 1 Chronicles 24 through 8. So if this has been a blessing, I wish I had done this earlier, but I forgot. So if this has been a blessing, I want you to like it. Hit the like button. I want you to share it with people. I want you to subscribe to the channel. That way it's going to come up every day. Otherwise, you may never find me again. If this has been a blessing and you have never been with me before, make sure you subscribe, and then you can go all the way back to Genesis 1. Start with reading your Bible and then coming to me. I don't want to be your commentator, right? I don't want you to get my opinion. I want you to come up with what you see God is showing you, right? And then kind of work with that, and then you hear what God is showing me. And then you get to understand more and more and more of who God is, and that's better for our lives. So that is it for today, and keep reading. I'll see you guys tomorrow.